I am Dr. Norine Wendi from Cameroon. I began following Dunamis in June 2025. I was introduced to Dunamis TV by my mother in the Lord. I'm from a different commission. When I got challenged in my health and it was apparent that hospitals couldn't grant me help that I needed because I was diagnosed of a terminal condition. So she connected me to Dunamis TV and to Commanding the Day Midnight Prayer. So I've been following since then, right up till now, until Jesus returns. Nothing is taking me away from the altar. And I got healed from adrenal insufficiency through the Commanding the Day Midnight Prayer. It actually began early June when I had a horrible nightmare. And in that nightmare, I saw, first of all, a lady and her daughter. And then they were talking to a soothsayer and telling him to make sure that I enter a grave. On turning around, I noticed that there was a grave that had been dug. So I was praying so hard in that dream. And then eventually the soothsayer began covering back the grave. And while he was covering, this lady and the daughter were urging him to leave it open. Peradventure, I will fall into it. So I zapped out of that dream and I took it to God in prayer. I knew that it was an attack that was coming my way. Then on the 6th of June, while on my prayer altar, the Lord gave me Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 6. And at that time, I was hale and hearty, and I was wondering why the Lord would give me a healing scripture. But I held on to it. Just peradventure in future, I would need it. So I wrote it down in my diary, and I was praying with it. Until this fateful day, this fateful night on the 27th of June, that is when the challenge showed up. I returned from the market with my husband. We had gotten some stuff for the house. I was really tired. I went to sleep. And at exactly 2 a.m., I shook from another nightmare. And this one was much more frightful than the one I had earlier on because I was in the midst of dead people. And they were preparing food in the kitchen. I was with them. And they handed to me a bowl of beans. One thing was strange about the food I was given. I knew it was beans, but looking at it physically, it wasn't the beans we know. So I was complaining, what kind of beans is this? But while complaining, I was eating. You know, I really didn't like it, but I was eating. When I shook from there, I called my husband and I told him, this is the dream I've had. He is a pastor as well. So he declared words and told me to go back to bed. As I lay down immediately, 5 minutes later, I felt an arrow hit me. So I began to scream. And I told him, somebody is sniffing life out of me. So I was screaming and screaming and telling him I'm dying. He said, no, you can't die. He kept on declaring words. It was exactly 2 a.m. So he got the car and rushed me to a mission hospital that was nearby. On getting to the hospital, they realized that my BP had dropped to 6 on 3. That is very abnormal. That is serious hypotension. So they actually queried hypotension and they were trying to deal with it until when I was stable, they took me to the ward where I lay down. And as I lay down, I'm one person who has benefited so much from the ministry of angels. I've always followed Bishop David Oyedepo and his teachings. So I've benefited so much from his teachings and the ministry of angels. So as I lay there, the only thing that was on my mind was to call on the angel of healing to rescue you. So I began meditating and calling out on the angel of healing. But to my shock, a man just popped up like he came up from the floor. I was with my husband, but he said he didn't see anybody. And then this man said, I am John the Baptist. Rely on the great physician. The moment I heard that, fright came upon me. I understood that what I'm going in for, the hospital cannot help. I began to contemplate. I was already troubled. Will I be able to handle this? Will my faith be able to carry me through? I was deeply worried. So from there, I was discharged 3 days later and sent home. 2 days after I was home, the symptoms showed up again. I went back to the same hospital. They kept me again for another 3 days. The same issue, hypotension. My body was extremely weak. I couldn't walk on my own. I was feeling a serious a pain, heaviness around my chest. I could not speak more than 3 words at a time. And then I had severe breathing difficulties, meaning that I cannot sit up. I must have to lie down. If any air has to get into my lungs, I must be lying down flat. So I spent all of that season lying down. So when they brought me back, they struggled to stabilize me again, and then they sent me home. I got home. 2 days later, again, it showed up. They rushed me to the same hospital. At that point, the doctors there said they were not going to admit me anymore. I pleaded that I needed to even be stabilized. They said, no, if you stay here, you will die. Go further. And when they say go further in Cameroon, for us in Cameroon, they mean go to the regional hospital where you have specialists. So I was with my sister. She took me to the regional hospital, kept me on admission. I met with the internist. I met with the neurologist. So the internist prescribed some tests. She asked me to do an EEG. She asked me to do an ECG. And then she sent me for an endoscopy, because we're trying to lay their hands on where the issue was coming from. Because each time these symptoms show up, my blood pressure drops drastically. So on this day I was taken to the regional hospital, it went down to 57/35. Barely enough to keep anybody alive. So they were trying to figure out. She told me, like, in her words, she said, this is a sign that something is wrong. We have to check what is wrong to be able to treat you. So I went for the ECG. They said there was an anterior lobe issue, so the heart wasn't pumping properly. But to her, it was not enough reason why I should be in that state. So she kept me at the hospital for 2 weeks and then discharged me again. I went home, still in that. She just said, when you go home, I'm sure you'll feel better. It's not like she was discharging me on the premises that I'm better. No, she just sent me home. So when I got home, I continued lying on the spot. And then that was when my spiritual mother came in and she said, no, this is no longer ordinary. At the time, she wasn't in Cameroon, she was in Canada. She called and said, baby girl, I would like you to connect to Commanding the Day Midnight Prayer. And I was a little hesitant, not because I didn't like it, but because it coincided with my personal prayer hour. So I asked her, I said, but mommy, it coincides with my prayer hour. What do I do? She said, my dear, if your own prayer was able to have rescued you till this moment, I am very convinced that you wouldn't be in that bed. I know you too well. So let us go to the higher altar. When she said so, I know her. She is a spiritual person to her core. I just knew that I have to obey. So I set aside my spiritual and I began connecting to Commanding the Day. And as God will have it, he gave me another 3 o'clock to 4 a.m. and he called it prophetic. And it was so beautiful. He made a beautiful marriage, because when Daddy finishes from 11:30 to 1, at 3 now, everything that he prayed for on the altar, I use it now to declare words between 3 and 4. And it continued like that. Now, at a certain point, my husband realized that they couldn't continue to keep me home. He said it was better we go back to the hospital. So we went to the hospital, and when we got to the hospital, the internist now said, we are going to go deeper. I thought it was a superficial issue, but from every indication, if we are not serious, we are going to lose this lady. So she said, we should check for cortisol. She told the other specialists. And it was my first time hearing that word, cortisol. And as one person that likes to always know a little of everything, I quickly Googled cortisol. I saw what it was all about. So when she said, I said, okay, fine, we are going in for the test. She said 8 a.m. and then 8 p.m. So at 8 a.m., we ran the cortisol level, and then it was barely above the minimum. It was barely above the minimum. And then in the evening now, we came for the session, that evening session, and then it showed that it was far below the minimum. Like the normal range is something around 71 to 600 and a few figures, but I was below 71, I was at 51. And this cortisol is a hormone that helps your body to operate or to function. It is produced by from my findings, the hypothalamus, sorry, the pituitary gland produces the hormone, and it is regulated by the hypothalamus. sending now signals to the adrenal cortex. The adrenal cortex now produces just the exact amount that your body needs for you to be able to function. So the moment that there is a miscommunication between the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, the wrong signal is sent to the adrenal cortex. So you begin having issues. And like Daddy explained on Sunday, now your body begins to fight itself. Instead of fighting the disease, it is fighting your organs, looking for means now like, let's kill, let's destroy the kidney, let's destroy the liver, let's destroy the heart. So your body is autoimmune. Your body now that immune system gets confused and is fighting your life instead of fighting a disease. So that is the state in which I was for all those months. And then God began to show up. God began to show up. The first thing that the Lord did was restoring my breath. And it was through the commanding the day midnight prayer. Though it wasn't a declaration, Daddy was on his trumpet. And then he blew and he was blowing and he was blowing and he was blowing. And then I got to a point, my volume was loud. I was like, Daddy, please, can you stop? The volume is too loud. And then I got a voice that seemed to have rebuked me instead, that breathed along with him. So I began taking in a breath. I couldn't take a deep breath above 2 to 3 seconds. So I began breathing, taking in a deep breath. I noticed that I went on and on and on. That was the first aspect that was restored. So I called my mother in the Lord and I told her. She was excited. She said, we keep holding on to the altar. So when because we have the same time zone with Nigeria, yes. So she would send me a message. I hope you are on the altar. I said, Mom, you know I can't go anywhere. Because one thing that the devil did, thinking that it was for his good, that turned around being for my good, is he took sleep away from me. So I could practically pray 20 hours out of 24 because I couldn't sleep. They placed me on Melex. I was still unable to sleep. The doctor, one of the specialists came in and said, I expected this thing to knock you off so you can sleep at least 12 hours. Why are you still awake? And I jokingly told him that nobody sleeps when his house is on fire. I stuck on the altar. My breathing was restored. That was aspect number one. When my breathing got restored, I noticed something else. I went to bed on my normal size, woke up the next morning, I had added above 9 kilograms.
These pages are packed with the power to shift your story.
I need the move of God in my community. I need the move of God in my nation, the former and the latter rain. Not by might, not by power, but by my spirit. The anointing of the Holy Spirit. And then this is very brutal. Dead men wanted. Dr. Misenenche has the vision factor, the power of integrity, imagine with resistance. They love the foundation for greatness and winning with humility and simplicity. These books are literally the story of who we are and what we do.
Like going to bed and then over the night, I prayed. I didn't even feel like there was anything different about my body. But when the first specialist came in the morning, she turned and asked the nurses, what happened? The nurses said, we don't know. We have just seen her like this. And then I asked myself, is something wrong? I said, go and get the scale. Go and get the scale. They got the scale, they brought. I climbed on it. I noticed that I was already 9 kilograms above my previous weight. That's when I saw that my feet were swollen. My hands were swollen. I think I have the pictures also at the studio. My neck swollen, my head, everything. She immediately recommended, because they already know how this disease transitions. They were already suspecting that, okay, it has gotten to the liver, it has gotten to the kidneys. So they sent for the nephrologist. He came and signed that I should go run the kidney function, liver, and then bring the results. So they took the specimens, they went and ran. And while they went to the lab with the specimens, I just kept on declaring the words as Daddy would declare. Even the words that did not concern me directly, I kept declaring. The testimonies I had seen, I kept them on my mind, so they kept me walking. when the results came back, perfect kidneys, perfect liver, they were shocked. They looked at it, they were shocked. So they said, okay, in this case, we'll place her on laxatives to drain the water from her system so that she can recover her body. But when they gave me the first dose of laxatives, I reacted negatively towards it. So they had to stop. So I remained in that state, very ugly, looking like I'm just going to pass on the next second. And I stayed there, still at the hospital. That was, I think, more than a month. And then there was something peculiar about this challenge. Each time I close my eyes, not sleeping, closing my eyes, instantly I zap into another world. Yes, instantly I'm in another world. And in this other world, I will see my old classmates or former classmates that are of blessed memory, former neighbors that were of blessed memories, family members that were of blessed memory. It's like they have a whole world on their own. Yes. And then it's like the eyes are useless because everywhere is dark. As in dark. You know, some people have all heard of testimonies where people actually got to that state and then they found themselves in heaven, they found themselves with angels. So I was always questioning myself. I said, is my own case this bad? How am I finding myself only in the midst of dead people? But peculiar things happened around that season. One of the days, while in the midst of these dead people, they were taking snapshots. But they weren't using cameras. But I know that these are snapshots we want to take. All of us were actually posed. But the moment they lifted up whatever they had to take the snapshot, I stumbled and fell. So it came out without me. It came out without me. And then also another season, they were distributing food to everybody. As I got there to get my own food, this person who is distributing food got distracted. And then I stood there until I zapped back into this life. I didn't get food. So it continued like that. I'm in this realm and I'm in the other realm. So the most interesting part of Dr. Paul Inenche came in because I had, during my healing season, I had at least 10 encounters with him. And each time he shows up, one symptom goes away. Each time he shows up, one symptom goes away. Now, this is how the other symptom went away. I was in the Glory Dome. I had never been there before. I was in the Glory Dome. In a trance, yes, Daddy was at the other end ministry. And then this trailer drives into the Glory Dome, carrying a container, this freight container where they transport goods from one nation to the other. Yes. So I was looking at it to, let me see what exactly is in this container. But Daddy was so furious. He said, stop, bring them out. I was thinking to myself, this kind of anger like this. The container, the back of it burst open, and then they were actually tipping people out like sand. Guess what? I was one of those that came out. I was standing in the auditorium, but seeing myself come out in fact, along with the people. When I shook out of it, that is how my body began to return to normal. Gradually, the weight began to reduce. Because I was actually like I was pregnant until, to the extent, my sisters, even my mom, she asked me, she said, in this condition, are you pregnant? I said, pregnant? How? I'm not pregnant. I'm not that daft to be pregnant in this state of health. So they were all worried about the whole thing. But as that instance passed, the body began to return to normal. And then the second time Daddy showed up, it was still in the auditorium. I saw him standing, and then there was this snake that was approaching. Daddy was putting on red and red. And I was just thinking to myself that today is dangerous. So red suit, red shoes. Today can be a very dangerous day. Eventually, I noticed that this snake crawled out. I couldn't tell where exactly, but it was going towards Daddy. He just lifted up his leg and put it on the head. And then he continued conversing like nothing was going on. He was just conversing. And I was looking at her. That your leg is on the head of a snake and you are just okay. He didn't say a word, no word at all. But the impact was felt on my body. The restoration progressed. Now, how I stopped zapping into that dark world is also another interesting one. On this fateful day, I was deep in the valley in that world. And then I saw Daddy. I could perceive that Daddy is here. And I could also perceive that he is with two other men. And then he said, follow me. When I heard the voice, follow me, I said, I knew that Daddy is here. So I began following. He was climbing the hill. I was following. When he got to a certain point, I now realized that there was green pasture the other way with light, absolute light. So I followed until when he was getting out to the area of light, the two men, I couldn't see them anymore. He got into the light. I came now to the light. From that moment, even when I dream, not just closing my eyes, I dream of light, no more darkness. It had been, I think, about 4 months that I had never seen light. In a dream or closing my eyes, I had never seen light. So that one was handled. I began to enjoy sleeping. I began to sleep because it was impossible for me to sleep. I began to sleep well, and then the pain in my chest began to reduce as well. And then this fateful night, I spoke about it on Sunday, this fateful night, I laid in bed. And then I had another encounter. I couldn't really tell exactly what it was. But when I shook with joy. I felt so joyful in me. And then I lifted my pillow, placed it at the bed crown, and leaned against it. There was no light in my room. But I knew that there is somebody in the room. My husband was on a journey. So definitely he's not the one. The kids will not come into my room without knocking. So it's not the kids. I was about asking, who is there? But I was just still. And then just close to my closet. That's what I heard Mommy's voice.
Just as she stood by her closet, moments before sleep claimed her, something shifted. A presence, not fear, not imagination, but divine. In a form she could recognize Dr. Becky Paulinenci, an angel of the commission, carrying words not of this world, words of healing, words of victory.
It was practical, and she screamed, "You've got your healing." I saw myself in a hospital department, and then a man stood there with something like, let me just call it a scroll because the Bible calls it a scroll. Yeah, a film of paper that was long.
What happened next will challenge everything you believe. Stay tuned.
Immediately, less than 30 seconds, I felt a movement in my body.